The first thing Ethan noticed was the child. Not the voice on the phone, not the 4 years of silence, not even the person he once thought he would never forget. It was the small child in his arms, bundled up in an oversized hoodie, clinging tightly as if the world was too big and too cold. And somehow, that was what made Ethan stop walking. He had arrived at Central Station faster than he expected, faster than he wanted to admit, telling himself the entire way that this was nothing more than a debt, something he would settle and walk away from, clean and final. But the moment he saw Liam standing there under the dim platform lights, everything inside him felt off. Liam looked different, thinner, almost fragile in a way that didn't match the person Ethan remembered. His posture slightly slouched as he adjusted the child in his arms, his clothes worn, his expression tired, like life had been pressing down on him for far too long. And yet those eyes, those same eyes Ethan used to lose himself in, were still exactly the same. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The noise of the station faded into the background, replaced by a silence that stretched too long, too heavy, filled with everything that had been left unsaid for 4 years. Then Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh, breaking the moment before it could become something else. "So this is it," he said, his voice calm, but edged with something colder underneath. "You disappear after playing me like a fool, and 4 years later you call me out of nowhere. Carrying someone else's kid?" Liam didn't react immediately. He simply shifted the child slightly, one hand instinctively supporting the small back, the other brushing away a strand of hair from the child's forehead with a gentleness that didn't match the words he was about to say. "Got caught messing with the wrong person," Liam replied lightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips, as if he was talking about something trivial, something that didn't matter. "Turns out rich people don't like sharing." Ethan's expression darkened instantly, anger rising faster than he could control. "You're unbelievable," he said, stepping closer, his eyes scanning Liam from head to toe, taking in every detail he didn't want to notice. "Back then I thought you found some wealthy sponsor and ditched me for a better life, but look at you now." His gaze flicked briefly to the child before returning to Liam's face. "What happened? Didn't work out the way you planned?" Liam let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no real humor in it. "Life happens," he said simply. "You should know that." Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms as if to put distance between himself and everything standing in front of him. "And the kid?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Don't tell me that's another one of your mistakes." Liam glanced down at the child for a second, something unreadable passing through his eyes before he looked back up. "Pretty much," he said. "Got someone pregnant. She didn't want the responsibility, so I ended up with it." The words were casual, careless even, but the way his hand tightened ever so slightly around the child didn't go unnoticed. Ethan's jaw clenched. "You really haven't changed at all," he muttered. "Still reckless, still irresponsible." Then his eyes narrowed. "So why call me?" Liam met his gaze directly this time. No smile, no deflection. "Because I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "I'm broke, I don't have a place to stay, and I'm not letting my kid sleep on the street." Ethan stared at him, disbelief flashing across his face. "And that's supposed to be my problem?" he shot back. Liam didn't flinch. "You owe me," he repeated, his voice steady. "I saved your life. This is me collecting." The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable, dragging Ethan back to a memory he had never fully understood until now. The fever, the darkness, the feeling of someone holding on to him when everything else was slipping away. For a moment, he said nothing, his anger colliding with something far more complicated, something he didn't want to acknowledge. He looked at Liam again, really looked this time, at the pale skin, the exhaustion barely hidden behind that stubborn expression, and then at the child, small, quiet, resting against Liam like that was the only place it felt safe. For years had turned everything into something unrecognizable. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair before letting out a low, frustrated laugh. "You really know how to pick your timing," he said. There was a pause, then he turned away slightly, as if the decision itself annoyed him. "Fine." Liam blinked, just once, as if he hadn't expected that answer so quickly. "Fine," he repeated. Ethan shot him a sharp look. "Don't get the wrong idea," he said immediately. "This is just me paying off a debt. Once it's done, we're done. Completely." Liam held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a small nod. "Got it." Ethan's eyes lingered on the child again, just for a fraction of a second, before he turned and started walking. "Come on," he said without looking back. Don't make me regret this already. And as Liam adjusted the child in his arms and followed behind him, neither of them realized that the moment they stepped away from that platform together, they had already walked straight back into a past that was far from over. The ride back was silent, not the kind of silence that felt calm, but the kind that pressed down on the air, heavy and suffocating, as if even breathing too loudly might break something fragile between them. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, but his attention wasn't entirely there. Every now and then, almost unconsciously, his gaze flickered toward the rearview mirror, and every time, he saw the same thing. The child was still clinging to Liam, small arms wrapped tightly around his neck, quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. No whining, no fidgeting, none of the noisy restlessness Ethan was used to seeing in children his relatives brought over during family gatherings. This one was different, too quiet, too still. And yet, those eyes, wide, clear, constantly moving, curiously observing everything, the car, the lights outside, and sometimes him. Ethan frowned slightly before forcing his gaze away. It wasn't his business. None of this was. When they arrived at the apartment, Ethan stepped out first and unlocked the door, walking in without waiting, expecting them to follow, but when he noticed the silence behind him lingering too long, he turned back, irritation already rising. Liam was still standing at the doorway, holding the child, unmoving, as if there was an invisible line he couldn't cross. His eyes briefly swept across the clean floor, the neat arrangement of furniture, the quiet, controlled space, and for a moment, something in his posture shifted, subtle, but obvious enough. Like he didn't belong there. Like stepping in would stain something. "Are you coming in or not?" Ethan asked, his tone sharper than necessary. Liam hesitated, his fingers tightening around the worn fabric of his faded coat, the edges frayed, the color dulled beyond recognition. I'm a bit dirty," he said quietly, almost under his breath. Ethan stared at him for a second, then clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Stop dragging this out," he said, turning away. "I only stay here while I'm studying. It's not even that big." He paused briefly, then added, colder this time. "You can use the guest room. 3 months. That's all you get. Find a proper job and leave." Liam lowered his head immediately. "Thank you," he murmured, the words soft, careful, like he was afraid even gratitude might be too much, before finally stepping inside, his movements cautious, almost restrained, as if he was trying not to touch anything unnecessarily. He carried the child into the guest room, closing the door gently behind them. Only then did his shoulders loosen slightly, like he had been holding his breath the entire time. The child shifted in his arms, looking up at him. "Papa," the small voice called, soft but clear. Liam forced a faint smile, brushing his fingers through the boy's hair. "We're staying here for a while, okay?" The boy nodded immediately. "I'll be good," he said, simple and certain, like it wasn't the first time he had said those words. Liam's expression flickered, something painful crossing his face before disappearing just as quickly. "You always are," he whispered, pulling him closer for a brief moment. That evening, Ethan called them out for dinner. His tone was neutral, distant, as if this was nothing more than a responsibility he intended to fulfill and nothing more. When Liam stepped out again, Ethan noticed the difference immediately. After washing up, Liam looked cleaner, more put together, his features sharper, more recognizable, like a faint shadow of the boy Ethan used to know. But the clothes he wore were still old, worn thin, clearly used for far too long, while the child, in contrast, was dressed neatly, modest but clean. Ethan's gaze lingered for a second. At least he takes care of the kid, he thought, though he didn't say it out loud. They sat at the table, the atmosphere stiff, until Ethan finally spoke. "How old is he?" he asked, his eyes briefly landing on the child. "And his name?" Liam answered without hesitation. "Noah. Noah Carter. A little over 3. Ethan repeated the name silently in his mind. Noah Carter. His gaze rested on the boy a moment longer, his brows knitting slightly. He looked smaller than other kids his age. "You can't even take care of yourself, and you're raising a child?" Ethan said flatly. "Do you even think?" Liam's hand paused for a fraction of a second before continuing. "I couldn't leave him," he replied quietly. Ethan let out a dry laugh. "You must have loved his mother a lot." There was a brief pause. "I did," Liam said. "Then why did you break up?" The answer came softer, but heavier. "Guess this is my karma." Ethan's expression darkened instantly. He understood. Of course he did. The words hit exactly where they were meant to, dragging up something he had buried for years, and for a moment, the tension between them sharpened. But instead of responding, Ethan lowered his gaze and continued eating in silence. The only sound left was the faint clatter of utensils and Liam eating, quick, almost desperate, like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days. Ethan frowned, a hint of discomfort flashing across his face. "Slow down," he said abruptly. "There's plenty. No one's taking it from you." Liam froze slightly, then slowed, his ears turning faintly red. "Sorry," he murmured. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. The train ticket cost more than I expected." Something twisted inside Ethan's chest, sharp and unfamiliar, but he pushed it down immediately, standing up before it could grow into something else. "Leave the dishes in the sink when you're done," he said, his tone returning to that distant neutrality. "Someone will clean them later." Then he turned and walked away, back into his room, closing the door behind him. But the silence there wasn't any better. Because the moment he was alone, the memories came rushing back, uninvited, uncontrollable. The plans they once made, studying abroad together, building a life that belonged only to them, a future that once felt certain. And how easily it had all been destroyed. He had told himself he was over it. He had believed it. But seeing Liam like this, worn down, exhausted, still holding on to that child like it was the only thing keeping him standing, Ethan didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt something worse. He felt pain. And the child, he didn't hate him. Not even a little. If anything, there was something about the boy, something strangely familiar, that made it impossible. But forgiveness? Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing the thought away. Not that easily. Not after everything. No matter how much had changed, there were things he refused to let go of, and Liam Carter was one of them. Morning came quieter than Ethan expected. There was no sound of movement, no awkward noise from unfamiliar people in his space, nothing out of place, and yet when he stepped out of his room, something felt different. The apartment was clean. Not just tidy, but spotless. The dining table wiped down, everything arranged neatly like it had never been used the night before, and on the table, there was a simple breakfast, still warm, placed carefully to one side, as if it had been positioned with hesitation. Ethan paused for a second, his brows knitting slightly before his gaze shifted toward the kitchen. Liam stood there, already dressed, the same worn clothes but cleaner now, his movements quiet, controlled, like he was trying to make as little presence as possible. When he noticed Ethan, he straightened almost immediately. "There wasn't much in the fridge," Liam said, his voice low, cautious. "So I just made something simple. Sorry, I didn't ask first. I didn't want to wake you." Ethan didn't respond right away. His eyes lingered on the breakfast, then moved past Liam, toward the entrance. The child was already there, small shoes on, standing patiently by the door, holding on to Liam's sleeve like he had been taught to stay close, to not wander, to not cause trouble. For a brief second, something in Ethan's chest shifted, faint but noticeable. "Papa," the boy said softly. Then his gaze lifted, meeting Ethan's. There was a pause. Then, with a small, careful voice, he added, "Good morning." It was simple, polite, too polite for a child his age. Ethan blinked once, caught off guard by something he couldn't quite name, before giving a short nod. "Morning." Liam lowered his head slightly, as if even that small interaction made him uneasy. "We were just about to head out," he said quickly, almost like he needed to explain himself before being questioned. That was when Ethan noticed it, the bag in Liam's hand, worn but packed, like he was preparing to leave for the entire day. Something tightened briefly in Ethan's chest, a strange, unfamiliar drop, gone as quickly as it came. "Where are you going?" he asked, his tone neutral, but sharper than necessary. Liam hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "I'll walk around, see if anywhere's hiring," he said. "Maybe I'll get lucky." Ethan's gaze shifted to the child again, then back to Liam, disbelief flashing across his face. "You're taking him with you?" he asked. "You think anyone's going to hire someone who shows up with a kid?" Liam's fingers tightened slightly around the strap of his bag, but his expression didn't change much. "I don't really have a choice," he replied quietly. There was no self-pity in his voice, just fact. That somehow made it worse. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, irritation surfacing, though it wasn't entirely directed at Liam. "Just send him to daycare," he said. "I'll pay for it." Liam looked up immediately, clearly startled. "No, don't argue." Ethan cut in, his tone firm. At least for today, just stay here or take him somewhere nearby. You don't need to drag him around like that. There was a brief silence. Liam lowered his gaze again. Okay. It came out softer this time, more hesitant, as if agreeing itself felt like he was asking for too much. Ethan reached into his pocket almost absent-mindedly and pulled out some cash, holding it out without looking directly at him. For lunch, he said. I'll be back this evening. Dinner's already taken care of. You don't need to worry about it. Liam didn't take it right away. His hand hovered for a second before finally accepting it carefully, like he was afraid even touching it might cross a line. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice lower than before. Not just gratitude, something closer to restraint, like he was trying very hard not to exist more than necessary. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. The way Liam stood slightly to the side instead of directly in front of him. The way he avoided eye contact and less spoken to. The way every movement seemed calculated to take up as little space as possible, as if he was afraid of becoming a burden, of being seen as something inconvenient, something unwanted. It was subtle, but it was there. And for some reason, Ethan found it unsettling. You don't have to act like that, he said suddenly, before he could stop himself. Liam looked up, confused. Like what? Ethan paused, then clicked his tongue lightly. Nothing, he muttered, turning away as if it wasn't worth explaining. Because he didn't know how to explain it. Didn't know why it bothered him. Liam simply nodded, not pressing further. Of course he wouldn't. He never asked for more than what he was given anymore. And as Ethan grabbed his keys and headed toward the door, he could feel it again. That faint, unfamiliar tension in his chest. Something between irritation and something far more complicated. Something he didn't want to look at too closely. Behind him, the boy's small voice spoke again. Bye. Ethan stopped for half a second, just long enough to hear it clearly, before stepping out without turning back. But the word lingered longer than it should have. By noon, the city had settled into a slower rhythm, the rush of the morning fading into something quieter, more ordinary, and somewhere within that calm, Liam found himself walking with Noah along the streets near Ethan's university. He didn't go far. He didn't dare to. Even as he walked, his steps were careful, measured, like he was afraid of getting lost in a place he didn't belong. One hand holding Noah's small hand firmly, the other occasionally adjusting the thin bag slung over his shoulder. Noah didn't complain. He never did. He simply walked beside him, occasionally looking around with quiet curiosity, taking in everything without asking for more. When they reached the small park across from the university, Liam slowed, then eventually stopped. There was an empty bench under a tree, shaded just enough to escape the midday sun. He guided Noah over and sat down, exhaling softly, as if only now allowing himself a moment to rest. From where they sat, the university campus was clearly visible. Students walked in and out, laughing, talking, carrying books, backpacks slung casually over their shoulders, their lives moving forward in ways that felt so natural, so effortless. Liam's gaze lingered there longer than it should have. For years ago, he had stood at the same starting line, maybe even ahead of most people. Top of his class. Teachers who believed in him. A future that had once been so clear, so close he could almost touch it. He should have been there, sitting in a lecture hall, complaining about assignments, planning internships, thinking about the kind of life he wanted to build. Instead, Liam lowered his gaze slightly, his fingers tightening unconsciously around the paper bag, holding their simple lunch. Life hadn't gone that way, not even close, but he had chosen this. Whether it had been the right choice or the wrong one didn't matter anymore. There was no going back, no undoing it. The only thing that remained was what he had now. Noah tugged lightly at his sleeve. Papa, the boy said softly. Liam blinked, pulled back from his thoughts, then looked down at him. Are you tired? He asked gently. Noah shook his head. No. There was a brief pause before he added. Are you? Liam froze for just a second, caught off guard, then forced a small smile. I'm fine, he said. He always said that. Noah didn't question it. He simply nodded, as if accepting that answer was something he had learned to do. Liam opened the paper bag, taking out the simple food they had bought with the money Ethan gave him, dividing it carefully, making sure Noah had the better portion without making it obvious. Eat slowly, he murmured, his voice softer now, warmer. Noah nodded again, holding the food with both hands, eating quietly, just like he always did. Liam watched him for a moment, really watched him. The way his small face focused on something so simple, the way he didn't complain, didn't ask for more, didn't even seem to expect more, and something tightened deep in Liam's chest. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Noah looked up, confused. "For what?" Liam hesitated, his throat tightening slightly. "For everything. For not giving you a better life. For making you grow up too fast. For dragging you into a world that was never meant to be this hard." But he couldn't say any of that. So instead, he just shook his head. "Nothing," he said quietly. Noah studied him for a second longer, then, without saying anything else, shifted closer, pressing lightly against his side in a small, instinctive gesture. Liam's hand stilled for a moment, then slowly moved, resting gently on Noah's head, fingers threading through soft hair in a motion that felt almost like reassurance, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to comfort anymore. Across the street, laughter echoed faintly from the campus, bright, carefree, untouched by the kind of choices that changed everything. Liam didn't look up again, because some things, once lost, were easier not to face. Noah was the first to notice him. Liam didn't even realize it at first, still lost in his own thoughts, until the small hand beside him suddenly tightened and the boy's eyes lit up, fixed on something behind him. "Papa," Noah whispered, then a little louder this time, unable to hold back the excitement in his voice. "It's him." Liam's body stiffened instantly. A cold, familiar tension ran through him before he even turned around, like some instinct had already recognized what Noah meant. And when he did look up, his breath caught for just a fraction of a second. Ethan, standing just across the path. Not alone. There was someone beside him, walking close, almost naturally close, a young Omega with delicate features and an easy smile, the kind of presence that drew attention without trying. For a split second, Liam's hand moved, almost reflexively, as if he wanted to cover Noah's mouth, to stop him from saying anything more, to pretend they hadn't seen anything at all. But it was too late. Ethan had already heard. Their eyes met, and just like that, the distance between 4 years collapsed into a single moment neither of them could avoid. Ethan's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering across his face before it disappeared just as quickly. Then, almost deliberately, he stepped closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against the Omega beside him, subtly pulling him nearer, as if making something clear without saying it out loud. Liam noticed. Of course he did. But he lowered his gaze almost immediately, like he had no right to look too long. "Liam," Ethan said, his voice even, controlled. Liam forced himself to straighten, his hand tightening slightly around Noah's. "Hello," he replied quietly. "I'm Liam." The Omega beside Ethan tilted his head slightly, curiosity evident in his expression. "You're?" Liam didn't hesitate this time. "I'm Ethan's cousin," he said calmly, the lie coming out smoother than expected, like he had already rehearsed it somewhere in his mind. The Omega's expression brightened instantly. "Oh, really? Nice to meet you," he said warmly, then glanced down at Noah. "And this little one is adorable." He crouched slightly, as if about to come closer, but Noah reacted immediately, clutching Liam tightly, his small face pressing into his chest. Liam's hand moved instinctively, holding him closer. "Sorry," he said softly. "He's a bit shy." The Omega chuckled lightly, not offended. "That's okay. Kids are like that." Then he looked back up. "Have you eaten yet? We were just about to grab lunch at the cafe nearby. You should join us." Liam shook his head almost immediately. "No, thank you," he said, his tone polite but firm. "We already ate. I was just about to take him home. It's his nap time." The Omega nodded, accepting the answer easily, though there was a hint of disappointment. "All right, maybe next time." Liam gave a small nod in return, then adjusted Noah slightly in his arms, as if preparing to leave. Ethan hadn't said anything during that exchange, not a single word, but his eyes had already taken in everything. The simple food packaging, the way Noah was eating earlier, the way Liam hadn't touched anything himself. He knew that pattern, knew it too well. Liam would always make sure others had enough first, even if it meant leaving himself with nothing. And now, it looked like that hadn't changed at all. His jaw tightened slightly, something uneasy settling in his chest. "We'll go first," Liam said quietly, not looking directly at him. Then, without waiting for a response, he turned and started walking away, Noah still clinging to him. Ethan's gaze followed them instinctively. At first, it was just habit, but then he noticed it. The way Liam's steps weren't completely steady. Subtle, almost unnoticeable if you weren't paying attention. But Ethan was. A slight imbalance. A faint limp that hadn't been there before. Or maybe, He just hadn't noticed it yesterday. Something in Ethan's chest tightened sharply, sudden and unwelcome. He frowned slightly, his eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. "You okay?" the Omega beside him asked, noticing the shift. Ethan blinked, then looked away, his expression returning to normal almost instantly. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." But as he walked in the opposite direction, that image stayed with him. The way Liam avoided eye contact. The way he lied so easily about their relationship. The way he refused help without hesitation. And the way he walked, like something had already been broken long before today. Ethan exhaled quietly, his grip tightening just slightly. He had told himself this didn't matter. That Liam didn't matter anymore. But the truth was, he had noticed everything. And that was the problem. He didn't go far. Even after leaving the park, even after forcing himself to walk in the opposite direction, Ethan couldn't focus on anything the Omega beside him was saying. The conversation blurred into meaningless noise, fading in and out as his mind kept replaying the same images over and over again. The untouched food, the way Liam avoided his eyes, the way he walked, slightly uneven, like every step carried something heavier than it should. Ethan stopped walking abruptly. "I just remembered something," he said, cutting off whatever the Omega was about to say. "I need to go." He didn't wait for a response. By the time he turned back, his steps were already faster, sharper, like he was trying to outrun something chasing him from the inside. When he reached a nearby cafe, he didn't think twice. He ordered quickly, food for 2. No, 3, then left just as fast, the bag still warm in his hand. By the time he found them again, Liam and Noah were sitting on the same bench, exactly where he had left them, as if they hadn't moved at all. For a brief second, Ethan slowed, watching them from a distance. Liam sat slightly hunched, one hand resting on Noah's back, absent-mindedly patting him in a slow, steady rhythm. Noah leaned against him quietly, his small fingers clutching the edge of Liam's shirt like he always did. Something about that scene made Ethan's chest tighten in a way he didn't want to examine too closely. So instead, he walked forward, his expression hardening before they could notice anything else. Liam looked up first, surprise flashing briefly across his face. "Ethan, eat." Ethan cut him off immediately, placing the bag down in front of him a little more forcefully than necessary. "I'm paying you back. Let me do it properly." Liam blinked, caught off guard. Ethan didn't give him time to respond. "And stop acting like this," he added, his voice sharper now, almost harsh. "Don't skip meals. You're raising a kid. If you collapse, what happens to him?" The words came out rough, unfiltered, sounding more like criticism than concern. Liam's fingers tightened slightly on his own sleeve. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, he nodded. "I understand." That was all. No explanation. No defense. Nothing. To Ethan, it felt like confirmation. Like Liam wasn't even going to deny it. Of course he would think that. Showing up near his school. Looking like that. Eating nothing. Acting small, careful, almost pitiful. It all fit too perfectly. A slow irritation rose again, covering something far more complicated underneath. Liam lowered his gaze, staring at the food for a second before opening it. He didn't say thank you this time. He just accepted it. Because explaining wouldn't change anything. Because even if he said the truth, it would still sound like an excuse. So what was the point? After a moment, Ethan spoke again, his tone colder now. "Why are you limping?" Liam's hand paused, just for a second, then continued. "I broke my leg," he said simply. "When his wife found out." The words landed without emotion, flat, like they didn't belong to him anymore. But for Ethan, something snapped. Anger flared instantly, sharp and uncontrollable, fueled by everything he still believed about the past. "Serves you right," he said, his voice low, biting. "That's what you get." The moment the words left his mouth, the air shifted. Liam didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't even look up. He just sat there, still, quiet, like he had expected nothing else. Ethan turned away abruptly, as if staying any longer would make something worse. He pushed the door open harder than necessary, ready to leave, ready to end this moment before it could linger. But then he heard it. "Papa." The small voice trembled slightly. Ethan stopped, just for a fraction of a second. He didn't turn fully, just enough to see it from the corner of his eye. Liam was still sitting there, shoulders slightly slumped, his head lowered, unmoving, while Noah had wrapped his arms tightly around him, pressing his small face against Liam's chest. "Papa, don't cry." The words were soft, careful, like something he had said before, something he had learned. Ethan's chest tightened sharply, The pain sudden and unwelcome, like something twisting deep inside him. He knew. He knew exactly what he had just done. The words he had thrown so easily. The cruelty he had dressed up as anger. That wasn't justice. That wasn't revenge. That was something else. Something he didn't want to name. He should have felt satisfied. He should have felt vindicated, seeing Liam like this, seeing how far he had fallen after everything he did. He should have hated him, but he didn't. All he felt was pain, and that was the worst part. Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look away, to take another step forward, then another. He didn't stop again, because if he did, he wasn't sure he would be able to leave. And that thought alone was enough to unsettle him. He had spent 4 years convincing himself he had moved on, that Liam Carter was nothing more than a mistake he had already buried. But now that Liam had walked back into his life, everything was unraveling again. And this time, it felt worse. Because this time, Ethan realized something he wasn't ready to accept. He regretted it. Not what he said, not what he did, but the fact that he had seen Liam again. Because now, there was no way to go back to not caring. That night, the apartment felt quieter than usual, not because there was no sound, but because every sound seemed to carry something unspoken underneath it. Ethan stood by the doorway of the guest room for a moment longer than necessary before finally knocking once and pushing it open slightly. Liam looked up immediately, almost instinctively, as if he had been expecting something. Ethan didn't step in fully. He just stood there, his posture stiff, his expression controlled. "About earlier," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I went too far." Liam blinked once, clearly not expecting that. Then he lowered his gaze, a faint, almost reflexive smile touching his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "It's fine," he said quietly. "You were right." His voice remained calm, steady, but inside, something tightened. He was right. I deserve that. For thinking, even for a second, that I could still stand anywhere near his world. For forgetting my place. For wanting something I was never meant to have. Ethan frowned slightly, something about that answer unsettling him. But before he could say anything else, Liam reached to the side and picked up a neatly folded bag, holding it out with both hands. "These are for you and Noah," Ethan said, placing it in his hands. "Clothes." He paused briefly, then added, his tone sharper than necessary, as if covering something else. "Throw away those old ones. They're an eyesore." Liam's fingers tightened slightly around the bag. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, embarrassment, maybe something closer to shame. He remembered the afternoon, the way he must have looked, the way that Omega had looked at him. Of course Ethan wouldn't want to be associated with someone like that. "Thank you," Liam said softly, lowering his head. "I'll pay you back when I have money." Ethan clicked his tongue lightly, already turning away. "No need," he said. "Consider it part of what I owe you." The words were simple, but something about them made the distance between them feel even more defined. A transaction, nothing more. "Also," Ethan added without looking back, "prepare the documents tomorrow. I've already contacted a daycare. I'll take you there." Liam hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Okay." The next morning felt different. When Liam stepped out of the room, dressed in the new clothes Ethan had bought, he looked almost like himself again. Cleaner, more put together. But there was a stiffness in the way he moved, like he wasn't used to wearing something that didn't feel worn down by time. His fingers occasionally brushed against the fabric, as if making sure it was still there. Noah, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. The moment he stepped out, his eyes lit up, his small hands tugging at his new clothes, clearly delighted, unable to hide it. When he saw Ethan, he didn't hesitate. He ran forward, wrapping his arms around Ethan's leg without warning. "Thank you," Noah said brightly. "Thank you for the new clothes." Ethan froze for a second, completely caught off guard. Then something in his expression softened almost instantly, something he didn't even try to hide this time. He looked down, hesitated, then gently placed his hand on Noah's head, ruffling his hair lightly. "You're welcome," he said. "They suit you." His gaze lingered for just a moment longer. "You're a good kid." Noah beamed, clearly happy with that. And for a brief second, something warm settled in Ethan's chest before he forced himself to look away. At the daycare, the process was simple. The staff greeted them warmly, their attention immediately drawn to Noah, who stood politely by Liam's side, his small hands held neatly in front of him, answering questions with a quiet, respectful tone far beyond his age. "He's so well behaved," the staff member said with a smile. "And adorable too." Then her gaze shifted between Liam and Ethan, something playful flickering in her expression. Your son looks like both of you. The words landed softly, but not lightly. Ethan's expression changed immediately, a faint stiffness returning to his face. He's not my son, he said flatly. The staff member blinked, clearly surprised. Oh, I'm so sorry. Liam didn't say anything. He simply lowered his head, his grip on Noah's shoulder tightening ever so slightly before loosening again, like he was afraid of holding on too tightly. Noah, however, didn't seem to notice the shift. His attention was already elsewhere. The playground, the bright colors, the slides, the swings, the laughter of other children. His eyes widened, excitement lighting up his entire face in a way Liam hadn't seen often enough. Papa, he whispered, almost breathless. Can I play? The staff member laughed softly. Of course you can. Starting tomorrow, this will be your school. Noah turned back immediately, nodding quickly. Yes. The answer came without hesitation, full of excitement, pure and unfiltered. After the paperwork was done, they let Noah play for a while. He ran from one place to another, trying everything, laughing softly, carefully, like he still wasn't used to being this free. Ethan stood to the side, watching him for a moment longer than necessary. He's really well raised, he said finally. Polite, calm, the most well-behaved kid I've ever seen. Liam didn't look at him. He's all I have, he said quietly. I'd do anything for him, even if it means coming back here, even if it means facing you again. Ethan didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on Noah, something unreadable passing through his eyes. After a moment, Liam spoke again, his voice hesitant this time. The person you were with yesterday, he started. Is he your partner? Ethan's expression hardened slightly. He could have answered, could have said no, but instead he turned away. That's none of your business. The words were cold, deliberate. Liam nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing else. I understand, he said quietly. I'll find a job soon. I won't stay long. Ethan didn't reply. He just stood there, watching Noah run across the playground, something heavy settling deeper in his chest. On the way back, he stopped to buy things, small things, necessities, clothes, toys, items Noah might need. He didn't say much about it, didn't explain, but even he couldn't deny it anymore. The boy wasn't his. But somehow, that didn't seem to matter as much as it should have. Days slowly fell into a rhythm, quiet, steady, almost deceptively peaceful. Every morning, Liam would wake up before sunrise, moving carefully around the kitchen so he wouldn't make too much noise, preparing breakfast for all three of them with whatever simple ingredients he could manage. By the time Ethan stepped out, everything would already be ready, neatly arranged, as if Liam had trained himself to exist without leaving a trace. After that, Ethan would leave for school, and Liam would take Noah to daycare, holding his small hand the entire way, never once letting go until the teacher came to take him inside. Then the rest of the day began. Job searching, walking from one place to another, rejections that came quickly, sometimes without even a full sentence. Until finally, luck, or maybe persistence, paid off. A small restaurant needed a server. The hours were long. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to start over. Enough to survive. Every evening, Liam would pick Noah up, his tiredness hidden behind a soft smile the moment he saw the boy run toward him. And when they returned home, sometimes Ethan would already be there. Sometimes he wouldn't. But on the nights he was, something small would happen. He would sit with Noah, watch TV, help him with simple things. And without realizing it, toys began to appear. Small ones at first, then more. Noah never asked for them, but Ethan kept buying them anyway. You're spoiling him, Liam said once, quietly. Ethan didn't even look up. He's a kid, he replied. Let him act like one. And just like that, the days passed. Peaceful on the surface, but not for Liam. Because every night, when everything was quiet, when Noah was asleep and the apartment finally felt still again, Liam would lie there, staring at the ceiling, counting the days. 3 months. That was all he had. And every day that passed meant one day closer to leaving. So he worked more, took extra shifts, accepted small side jobs no matter how exhausting they were, saving every bit he could, because when the time came, he needed to be ready, needed to have somewhere to go, somewhere he and Noah wouldn't be a burden. Meanwhile, life slowly started to show on him again, with regular meals, with less constant hunger, with someone forcing him not to skip eating. Liam began to look healthier. There was color in his face again, strength returning to his frame. After cutting his hair, after cleaning himself up properly, There were moments, brief, almost fleeting, when Ethan would glance at him and see it. The boy from 4 years ago, the one he had once loved. And every time that happened, Ethan would look away first. One evening, everything broke. Ethan was in his room, focused on his work, when the sudden sound of frantic knocking shattered the quiet. "Papa, no, Ethan." The words came out tangled, breathless, panicked. He opened the door immediately. Noah stood there, eyes red, tears streaming down his face, his small hands shaking as he tried to explain. "Papa hot. I call. He not wake. I shake him. He not answer." The words were broken, messy, overlapping, but it was enough. Ethan didn't wait. He rushed past him, straight into the guest room. Liam was on the bed, his face flushed unnaturally, his breathing uneven, his body burning under the touch. "Damn it," Ethan muttered under his breath, already reaching for his phone. Within minutes, they were in a taxi. Ethan held Liam up, supporting most of his weight, while Noah clung tightly to his side, silent now, too scared to cry anymore. Liam was barely conscious, weak, disoriented. And then, suddenly, he leaned in. His hand gripped Ethan's shirt tightly, his body curling closer as if searching for something familiar, something safe. "It hurts," Liam whispered faintly, his voice breaking. His fingers tightened. "Don't go." Ethan froze for just a second, then his arm instinctively tightened around him. "It's okay," he said, his voice lower, steadier than he felt. "I'm here." At the hospital, everything blurred into motion. Doctors, nurses, questions, then waiting, endless waiting. Noah had cried himself to sleep at some point, curled up in Ethan's arms, his small fingers still clutching onto him even in sleep. Ethan sat there, unmoving, holding the boy carefully, his eyes fixed on the closed door where Liam had been taken. 3 hours. 3 hours that felt like something was being slowly pulled apart inside him. When the doctor finally came out, Ethan stood up immediately. "He has gastritis," the doctor said. "It's been going on for a while, likely due to irregular eating and prolonged stress. He hasn't been taking proper care of himself." Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course he hadn't. He had seen it. Every single sign. And still, "There's something else," the doctor continued. "He only has one kidney, so his condition needs to be monitored much more carefully." Ethan froze. One kidney. The words echoed, sharp, precise, cutting through everything else. Because years ago, he had been in an accident. One of his kidneys had been severely damaged, and he had survived because someone he never met, had donated a kidney. He had tried to find that person, tried to thank them, but the hospital had refused. The donor wished to remain anonymous. Ethan stood there, the pieces not yet connected, but something deep inside him already beginning to shift, something he wasn't ready to face. Not yet. The question came sooner than Liam expected. It happened after the hospital, after the medication, after the silence that stretched just a little too long between them. Ethan didn't look at him when he asked, "Why do you only have one kidney?" His tone was casual. Too casual. Liam's hand paused for a fraction of a second before continuing, as if the question hadn't hit anything important. "I sold it," he said simply. No hesitation. No visible discomfort. Needed money at the time. The answer landed flat. Almost careless. But something about it felt wrong. Ethan's brows furrowed slightly, his jaw tightening. Of course it would be something like that. Reckless. Short-sighted. Just like him. "You really don't know how to take care of yourself," Ethan muttered, more to himself than anything else. Liam didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because this version of the story was easier. Easier than the truth. Easier than watching Ethan look at him any differently. After that, things changed. Subtly at first. Then more obviously. Ethan began to monitor everything. Meals. Medication. Sleep. "Did you take your medicine? Eat this. Don't skip meals." The tone was always the same. Sharp, controlled, almost annoyed, as if he was being forced into it. But Liam noticed. Of course he did. And he complied. Not because he wanted to, but because refusing would only make things worse. When Ethan told him to cut down on work, Liam shook his head immediately. "I can't," he said. "I need the money." Ethan's expression darkened. "You're not in a condition to overwork." "I need to leave," Liam replied quietly. "I need enough to get a place for me and Noah." The words were simple, direct, and they hit harder than anything else. Ethan went silent, because he had been the one who set that deadline. 3 months. And now, hearing it said out loud like that, something about it felt wrong. But he didn't take it back. He didn't soften it. because doing that would mean admitting something he wasn't ready to face. Instead, he turned away. And the next day, Liam had a new job. Lighter, better pay, less strain. Ethan never said it was him. Liam never asked. But they both knew, and neither of them spoke about it. The days continued, calm on the outside, unstable underneath. There were moments Ethan couldn't control, small ones, quiet ones, like when he would pass by the living room and see Liam sitting there, tired, leaning slightly to one side, and for just a second, the image would overlap with something from years ago. Or at night, when sleep came too easily, and dreams came with it. Liam's voice, Liam's warmth, the way he used to curl into him without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan would wake up abruptly, his chest tight, his breath uneven, staring into the darkness like he had just lost something all over again. He told himself it meant nothing, that it was just memory, just habit. But the feeling lingered longer than it should have. And then one night, everything slipped. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. It was something small, a moment too close, their hands brushing while reaching for the same thing. A pause that lasted a second too long. And then, Ethan moved first. Or maybe Liam did. Neither of them would remember it clearly afterward. The only thing that remained was the warmth, sudden, overwhelming, and the way everything else seemed to disappear for just a moment. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was messy, unguarded, like something buried too deep had finally broken through. Liam froze at first, then responded without thinking. Because some instincts never really disappear. Because some feelings don't die, no matter how much time passes. And then it ended, just as suddenly as it began. Ethan pulled back first. His expression changed immediately, like something had snapped back into place. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, tight. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away, just like that, leaving Liam standing there, alone. Liam didn't move for a long time. His fingers slowly curled into themselves, as if trying to hold on to something that was already gone. What did I just do? The thought came slowly. Heavy. Confusing. There was someone else. That Omega. The one Ethan stood beside. The one who clearly belonged in his world. And yet, Liam closed his eyes briefly, exhaling shakily. This shouldn't have happened. It can't happen again. Not when I don't belong here. Not when I was already planning to leave. The room felt quieter than usual that night. He sat there for a long time, his thoughts tangled, restless, until finally, one conclusion settled in. Maybe it was time. He had saved enough. Not everything. Not ideal. But enough to start somewhere small. Enough to leave before things became more complicated than they already were. Because staying would only make it harder. And Liam had already learned that lesson once. The next morning, Ethan woke up later than usual. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. He didn't want to see Liam. Not after what happened. Not after that moment he couldn't take back. Not after realizing how easily everything between them could fall apart again. So he stayed in his room longer than necessary, waiting, listening, until the faint sounds of movement in the apartment disappeared. Only then did he step out. The table was clean. Breakfast was still there. Everything looked normal. Too normal. He didn't think much of it. He grabbed his things and left. The day passed in a blur of lectures, assignments, and the pressure of finals closing in. He stayed at the library longer than usual, burying himself in work, convincing himself that distraction was enough to keep everything else away. By the time he returned home, it was late. Too late. The moment he opened the door, something felt wrong. The apartment was dark. Silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence he had grown used to over the past weeks, but something colder. Empty. There was no light. No sound of small footsteps. No soft voice calling out, "You're back." The air felt still, lifeless. And suddenly, without warning, that same fear from 4 years ago crashed into him all at once. Ethan's chest tightened violently. Liam. No answer. No. Nothing. He moved quickly, then faster, his steps no longer controlled as he rushed down the hallway and pushed open the guest room door. Empty. The room was clean. Too clean. Like no one had ever stayed there. His hands began to shake. That was when he saw it. A letter, placed neatly on the table. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. "Thank you for everything you've done for us, and I'm sorry for leaving you once and for coming back to trouble you again. That day, when I said you owed me your life. I was desperate. Please don't take it seriously. You don't owe me anything. I've stayed too long already. It's time for me to leave, to give you back your life. I hope you and the person you love will be happy." The words blurred as he read them. His grip tightened around the paper. Then suddenly, he ran. Out the door. Down the street. He didn't think. Didn't plan. He just ran. From the restaurant. To the daycare. To the park. Every place he could think of. Every place they might be. He didn't know where they had gone. But one thing was clear. He had to find them. And this time, if he did, he wouldn't let them go again. Hours passed. The sky darkened. The city quieted. But Ethan didn't stop. By the time the clock neared midnight, his steps had slowed, his breath uneven, his body exhausted, but something inside him refused to give up. And then, something pulled him back. A place. A memory. The park. The same bench. The first day they came back into his life. He ran. And this time he saw them. A figure sitting there. Small. Still. And the moment Liam noticed him, he stood up immediately, instinctively trying to leave, to run again. But this time, Ethan was faster. He grabbed his wrist. Tight. Firm. Not letting go. Noah stirred awake, startled, his small voice breaking into soft cries. But Ethan didn't care about anything else anymore. He pulled them both closer, wrapping his arms around them, holding them like they might disappear if he loosened his grip even for a second. Don't go, his voice was low. Shaking. Please. Liam tried to resist at first, but he was too tired, too exhausted to run anymore. And then he stopped. His body gave in, collapsing forward, his face pressing into Ethan's shoulder as the tears he had held back for years finally broke free. Noah clung to him too, crying quietly. One big, one small, both shaking, both breaking. And Ethan held them. One hand on Liam, one on Noah, his grip steady, protective. It's okay. I'm here, he murmured, over and over again, like he was trying to convince himself just as much as them. Eventually, he brought them home. Noah fell asleep quickly, exhaustion taking over. But Liam didn't move. Ethan guided him into his room, closing the door behind them. We need to talk, he said quietly. Not here. Not where Noah might wake up. Inside the room, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Ethan stepped forward first. He pulled Liam into his arms. Tight. Desperate. Why did you leave? Liam's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't want to make things difficult for you. You have someone now. We shouldn't stay together like this. Ethan tightened his hold immediately. There is no one, he said. There never was. Not in 4 years. Not in 7. Liam froze. But I hurt you, he said. Don't you hate me? Ethan let out a quiet breath, something breaking through his voice. I did, he admitted. The day you left. I hated everything. But more than that, his arms tightened. I just wished I could go back and lock you somewhere, so you couldn't leave me again. Liam broke down again. The tears came harder this time. He had held them in for too long. Far too long. And Noah, he whispered. Can you really accept him? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. No matter whose child he is. I don't care anymore. I'll take care of him like my own. Liam grabbed onto him tightly, his body shaking as he cried into Ethan's chest, unable to say anything else. Ethan didn't rush him. He stayed, held him, gently wiping away his tears, pressing soft kisses against his hair, letting him breathe, letting him feel safe again, for the first time in years. Slowly, Liam's breathing softened. His body relaxed slightly, as if the exhaustion had finally caught up to him. Ethan thought he had fallen asleep. He adjusted his hold, preparing to lay him down. Then a voice. Soft. Fragile. Noah is your child. Ethan froze. What? I gave birth to Noah, Liam said quietly. I presented late, as an Omega. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't get the chance. Ethan's mind went blank. Then why did you leave? The answer came slowly, painfully. Because I lied. About what? My life, Liam whispered. I was poor. My mother died early. My father was an alcoholic. His voice trembled slightly, but he continued. I worked hard, studied harder. I thought if I just kept going, I could get out. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. Then what happened? Liam closed his eyes. The day I found out I was an Omega, my father got drunk and caused an accident. Someone died. Silence fell heavy between them. Everything fell apart, Liam continued. I had to sell everything, even the house, just to compensate the victim's family. My father went to prison, and his voice broke. I had nothing left. Ethan felt something tighten painfully in his chest. So you left me? Liam nodded faintly. I couldn't stay with you, not like that. I didn't want to become your burden. He let out a shaky breath. But I was selfish, so I asked you to meet me one last time, and then he didn't need to finish. Ethan understood. Everything. The injuries Liam always brushed off. The trips he never joined. The way he pushed himself beyond exhaustion. All of it suddenly made sense. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. Liam gave a faint, broken smile. So you could pity me, he whispered. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be something shameful in your life, or someone you felt responsible for. Ethan said nothing. He just gently laid Liam down on the bed, pulling the blanket over him, his hand lingering for a moment longer than necessary. You're tired, he said softly. Sleep. His fingers brushed lightly through Liam's hair. I'm here now. His voice dropped, steady, certain. You won't have to carry everything alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, Liam didn't argue. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He held Liam in his arms, unmoving, as if even the slightest shift would make him disappear again, just like 4 years ago. Liam was quiet now, finally resting, his breathing soft against Ethan's chest, fragile, like something that had been holding on for far too long. 18. He had only been 18. No home, no money, no one. And still, he had carried a child through all of it. Ethan's gaze lowered, slowly tracing every detail he had once ignored. The pale skin, the weight that felt too light in his arms, the faint limp he hadn't noticed before, the body that had endured more than it ever should have, the illness, the missing kidney, the exhaustion hidden beneath quiet obedience. He didn't need to imagine anymore. The truth was already there, written all over Liam's life. And yet, Noah, that child had been raised so well. Gentle, polite, careful in a way no child should have to be. Liam had nothing. And still, he gave everything. Ethan's chest tightened, because the more he understood, the more unbearable it became. While he was still a student, still living in a safe home, still eating without thinking, still complaining about exams and deadlines, Liam was out there, alone, carrying a life inside him, learning how to survive one day at a time. While he was being protected, Liam had no one. While he was worrying about his future, Liam was fighting just to make it to the next day. Ethan's hand tightened unconsciously around him. The first day, Liam saying he hadn't eaten for 2 days. Back then, Ethan had felt annoyed, distant, unmoved. But now he understood. That wasn't carelessness. That was sacrifice. Liam had chosen to come back, chosen to risk everything just to find him. And Ethan, he had almost sent them away, just like that, as if they meant nothing, as if Liam meant nothing. The memory hit harder than anything else. And the lies, the ridiculous story about a rich man, the broken leg, the way Ethan had believed it without question, the way he had thrown those words, cold, sharp, merciless. Serves you right. His breath caught. What had he done? What had he been thinking? And Noah, that small boy who had only ever looked at him with quiet trust. There was a moment when Ethan had resented him, hated him, just because he thought he wasn't his. The guilt settled deeper. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead lightly against Liam's hair. I'm sorry. The words came out quietly. Too late. Far too late. The night stretched on, but his mind refused to rest. Every moment replayed. Every detail he had overlooked. The way Liam moved carefully, as if afraid of taking up too much space. The way he never asked for anything. The way he was always ready to leave. Even now. Even after everything. Ethan's eyes slowly opened again, something in them finally steady. He had lost Liam once, and that had been enough to follow him for years. But this time was different. Because now he knew. Now he understood. And this time, he wouldn't let him go, no matter what it took. No matter how much he had to fix, to make up for, to earn back. Because this time, he was no longer the boy who could afford to stand still. This time he would fight. For Liam. For Noah. For the life he almost lost. And for the first time, the truth settled clearly in his chest. He wasn't trying to repay anything anymore. He just didn't want to lose them again. The next morning, Liam didn't wake up early. For the first time in years, his body refused to rush, refused to stay alert, refused to wake up before it truly had enough rest. When he finally opened his eyes, the sunlight had already filled the room. It was quiet, warm, safe, a kind of peace he hadn't felt in more than 4 years. For a moment, he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, almost unsure if it was real. Then voices. Soft laughter. A child's voice. Liam slowly sat up, his movements still a little weak, and stepped out of the room. In the living room, Ethan was sitting on the floor, a small toy in his hand, completely focused as Noah excitedly tried to show him something. It was such a simple scene. But for Liam, it felt unreal. Today was the weekend. No rush. No pressure. Just time. Ethan looked up the moment he noticed him. Their eyes met for a brief second before Ethan stood up and walked over, his expression softer than Liam had ever seen it. Without hesitation, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss against Liam's forehead. "Are you hungry?" he asked quietly. "I made food." Liam froze for a second, caught off guard by how natural it felt. Before he could respond, Noah ran straight toward him. "Papa!" The small body collided into him, arms wrapping tightly around his waist. "Are we leaving today? The train will go without us." The words came out in a rush, still carrying the fear from the night before. Liam's chest tightened slightly. He quickly bent down, lifting Noah into his arms, holding him close. "No," he said softly, though his eyes instinctively flickered toward Ethan. Ethan stepped closer. His voice was calm. "Certain. We're not going anywhere," he said. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "This is your home. Yours and Papa's." Liam looked at him, surprised. Ethan met his gaze without looking away this time. "And, if you're okay with it," he continued, softer now, "I'd like to be part of that too." Noah blinked, processing slowly, then tilted his head. "Like a family?" he asked. "Like Mike's family. He has 2 dads." Ethan smiled faintly, crouching down to be at eye level with him. "Yeah," he said. "Like that." He hesitated for just a second before asking, "Would it be okay if I become your dad too?" For a moment, everything went still. Then Noah's face lit up. Bright. Pure. Without hesitation, he threw himself forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Ethan. "Daddy," he called out, his voice full of excitement. Ethan froze for half a second. Then his arms slowly came up, holding the small body back, a little tighter than necessary. Something in his chest shifted. Quietly. Completely. Liam stood there, still holding on to the moment, his eyes stinging slightly as he watched them. No more running. No more leaving. Just this. A small space. 3 people. And a chance to start again. Maybe not perfect, but real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt enough. That night, after Noah finally fell asleep, the apartment grew quiet again. Not the cold, empty silence from before, but something softer, something that finally felt like home. Ethan closed the bedroom door gently, the soft click echoing in the stillness, then turned back and pulled Liam into his arms without a word. This time, Liam didn't resist. He leaned into him, almost instinctively, like his body had already remembered where it was safe to rest. Ethan rested his chin lightly against Liam's hair, breathing in a scent he had missed for far too long, holding him close for a moment before speaking. "This morning," he murmured, his voice low, almost teasing, "while you were still asleep, I unpacked your bag." Liam stiffened slightly in his arms, then tried to hide his face against Ethan's chest. "Guess what I found?" No answer. Just silence, and the faint warmth of Liam's breath against him. Ethan let out a quiet breath, his hand sliding slowly down Liam's back, stopping when his fingers brushed against the thin fabric of his shirt. "You kept it," he said softly. "My old uniform." Liam's fingers tightened in his shirt. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a small voice, almost embarrassed, he whispered, "It still smelled like you back then." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, something in his chest tightening painfully, then loosening all at once. "You missed me that much," he said, not as a question, but as something he was only now allowing himself to believe. Liam didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way he pressed closer was enough. A quiet pause stretched between them, filled with everything they had lost and somehow found again. Then Ethan spoke again, softer this time. "Tell me the truth," he said, his tone gentler, but steadier. "Your leg, your kidney, stop lying to me." Liam's body tensed again, just for a second. "It was just an accident," he replied quickly. "And the kidney. I told you already, I sold it." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, his hand slowly moved, fingers tracing along Liam's side, hesitating for just a moment before slipping under the edge of his shirt. Liam sucked in a small breath. But Ethan didn't stop. His fingertips found it. The scar. Faint, but unmistakable. Clean. Surgical. Not the kind of wound someone gets from an accident. His hand stilled there, as if time itself had paused around them. Carefully, almost reverently, he traced along the length of it, his touch impossibly gentle, as if afraid that even the slightest pressure might hurt him. "This isn't from an accident," he said quietly. His voice had changed. There was no anger in it now, only something deeper, something that trembled. Liam didn't move. He didn't pull away. He just stood there, silent, as if he no longer had the strength to lie again. Ethan's hand shifted slightly, lower this time, where another scar lay hidden. Smaller, but just as real. His breath caught. And this, he whispered, his fingers brushing it with the same care. This isn't either. Liam's shoulders trembled. Don't, he said, his voice barely holding together. But Ethan pulled him closer instead, one arm wrapping around him firmly, his other hand still resting against those marks, those pieces of past Liam had carried alone. How much did you go through? Ethan asked, his voice breaking now despite himself. While I wasn't there. Liam finally let out a quiet, uneven breath, his forehead pressing against Ethan's chest. It doesn't matter anymore, he whispered. It's over. But Ethan shook his head slightly, tightening his hold. It matters to me. Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with everything Liam hadn't said, and everything Ethan was only now beginning to understand. After a long moment, Ethan lowered his head, pressing a gentle kiss to Liam's hair. No more lies, he murmured. Not between us. Not anymore. Liam closed his eyes, his hands slowly clutching onto Ethan's shirt, like he was afraid this moment might disappear if he didn't hold on tightly enough. Okay, he whispered. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like he was fighting the world alone. The day came quietly, but the tension was there long before they even stepped inside. Liam walked beside Ethan, his fingers subconsciously tightening against Noah's small hand, his steps slower than usual. He had tried to prepare himself, but no amount of preparation felt enough. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. His hand brushed lightly against Liam's back, a silent reassurance. Hey, he said softly, I'm here. Liam nodded, but his voice still came out uncertain. What if they don't like me? Ethan didn't hesitate. Then it doesn't matter, he replied. I do. The door opened, and everything changed the moment they stepped inside. Ethan's mother turned toward them and froze. Her eyes landed on Liam, widening instantly, her face draining of color. You? The word slipped out before she could stop it. Liam lowered his gaze instinctively, the old habit returning without warning. The air tightened. For a second, no one moved. Then, a small voice broke through. Nice to meet you, Grandma and Grandpa. Noah stepped forward, holding two small cards in his hands, his eyes bright despite the unfamiliar place. I made these for you. He carefully handed one to each of them, standing a little straighter, trying his best to be brave. The shift was immediate. Ethan's mother blinked, startled, her trembling hands accepting the card. Ethan's father glanced down at the uneven drawing, his expression softening despite himself. Noah smiled nervously. Do you like them? He asked. And just like that, something in the room loosened. Lunch was quiet. Not cold, but careful. Every movement measured. Every word weighed. Afterward, Liam brought Noah upstairs to rest. By the time he came back down, the atmosphere had changed. He could feel it before anyone spoke. Ethan stood when he saw him. They want to talk to you, he said quietly. Liam's chest tightened, but he nodded. He walked in beside Ethan, his shoulders slightly tense. Ethan's mother was already sitting there, her eyes red, her hands clenched tightly together in her lap, as if she didn't know what to do with them. Ethan's father broke the silence. Liam, he began, his voice steady but heavier than before. There's something we need to say. Liam didn't respond. He simply stood there, waiting. 5 years ago, his father paused briefly, as if choosing his words carefully. We made a mistake. Ethan's hand, resting at his side, slowly curled into a fist. Your mother, he continued, glancing at the woman beside him, was afraid. Afraid that Ethan's future would be affected. So she made a decision. Ethan's mother's shoulders trembled slightly. She hired someone to scare you, to make you leave on your own. Liam's fingers tightened faintly. He said nothing. But that man went too far, his father added, his voice lowering. Your leg. The sentence didn't need to be finished. Silence fell. Heavy. Ethan's breath stilled. His mind went blank for a moment, as if it refused to process what he had just heard. Then, slowly, painfully, it did. His jaw tightened. His chest felt like something was pressing down on it. He had thought it was just another story, another mistake, another bad choice Liam had made. But this was because of them. Because of his family. Because of him. Ethan's mother suddenly covered her mouth, a broken sob escaping before she could hold it back. I didn't know, she cried, her voice shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know it would hurt you like that. I just wanted you to leave. Her words fell apart, one after another, barely forming sentences anymore. Liam stood still, listening, not interrupting, not reacting, just taking it in. Ethan's father spoke again, quieter this time. And there's something else. Ethan's hand tightened further. He already felt it coming. Years ago, when Ethan was in the hospital, Liam's breath hitched, just slightly. The donor. His father looked at him directly now. Was you, wasn't it? Silence. Complete. Absolute. Ethan froze. The world seemed to narrow into a single point. His gaze shifted slowly toward Liam, searching, disbelieving, needing an answer he wasn't ready to hear. Liam didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. But the silence was enough. Ethan's chest tightened sharply. He didn't know which truth hurt more. That Liam had suffered because of him, or that Liam had saved him and never said a word. Ethan's mother broke completely at that moment. She stood up abruptly, her hands shaking as she stepped forward. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice breaking apart. "I'm so sorry," she reached out, then stopped midway, as if she didn't deserve to touch him. Her knees bent slowly, almost unconsciously, as if her body could no longer hold the weight of everything she had done. "I didn't know. I didn't know," Liam reacted immediately. "Please, don't," he said, stepping forward quickly, catching her before she could lower herself further. His voice wasn't angry, not even bitter, just gentle. "It's okay," he said softly. And somehow, that made it worse. "I understand," he continued, his gaze lowering slightly. "I'm a parent too. I know what it feels like to want the best for your child." He paused, then added quietly, "Back then, I wasn't someone you could accept. No accusation, no resentment, just truth. As for everything else," he said after a moment, "I chose it." The words were simple, but they carried everything. The room fell silent again. But this time, something had changed. Not tension, not distance, but something softer, something heavier, something real. Ethan's father nodded slowly, his voice quieter now. "Liam," he said, "would you be willing to call us Mom and Dad?" Liam looked up, startled. "We don't just want to apologize," he continued. "We want you here. As family." Ethan stood beside him, closer now, his presence steady, no longer uncertain. Liam's eyes softened slightly. For a brief moment, the hesitation returned, then faded. "Okay," he said. His voice was quiet. But this time, there was no doubt in it. And somewhere in the house, a small child laughed in his sleep, as if even he knew something had finally come home. On the way home, Noah couldn't stop talking. His small voice filled the car, bright and breathless, words tumbling over each other as he tried to tell everything at once. "Grandma played with me," he said, his eyes shining. "And Grandpa too. They pushed me on the swing, really high, and they gave me ice cream, and toys, and—" he paused, as if suddenly remembering something important. "They said I can come again." Liam smiled, softer than before, his eyes lingering on Noah just a little longer. "So, did you like spending time with them?" Noah nodded immediately, hugging the toy in his arms. "I like them a lot." Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice turning hopeful. "Can I go again tomorrow?" Liam let out a quiet breath, something warm settling in his chest. "Not tomorrow," he said gently, "but very soon." Noah accepted that answer easily, already satisfied, already smiling again. It was such a simple thing. But for Liam, it meant more than he could explain. Because for the first time, Noah wasn't just surviving. He was being loved. That night, after Noah fell asleep, the apartment returned to its quiet calm. Liam stood by the window for a long moment, watching the lights outside flicker softly in the distance, as if trying to organize the thoughts still lingering in his mind. Then he turned back. "When did you find out?" he asked quietly. Ethan, who had been leaning against the wall, looked at him, a faint smile appearing. "Not that long ago," he said. "You know, you're really bad at lying." Liam lowered his gaze slightly, his fingers tightening unconsciously. "I didn't want to tell you." Ethan pushed himself off the wall and walked toward him, his steps slow, unhurried. "Yeah," he said softly. "So I had to find out myself." He stopped just behind Liam, close enough for their warmth to overlap. "But do you know what's worse?" Liam turned slightly, just enough to look at him. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around Liam from behind, pulling him gently into his chest, resting his face lightly against the curve of his neck. "There was an idiot," he murmured, his voice low, almost amused, but not really, "who believed every single one of your lies." Liam's breath hitched. Ethan's hold tightened just a little. An idiot who didn't realize the person he loved had already become an omega. A pause. "An idiot who thought you left him for money." His voice softened further. An idiot who didn't even recognize his own child, even when everyone else could see it. The words weren't harsh, but they carried weight. Liam's fingers curled slowly, his chest tightening quietly as everything he had tried to hide was spoken out loud so simply. Ethan exhaled softly, his voice dropping into something steadier, deeper. And the price for that kind of stupidity, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. Then, quietly, clearly, "I love you." Liam closed his eyes. "I always have." Ethan's voice didn't waver this time. 8 years, and I never stopped loving you." Liam leaned back into him, just slightly, as if giving himself permission to believe it. A quiet moment passed, before Ethan's voice returned, softer now, but more searching. "Back then, when I had the accident," he said, his arms still around Liam. "How did you even know?" Liam stilled. For a second, it felt like time had slowed again. "A friend told me," he answered quietly. Ethan's brows drew together slightly. "A friend?" Liam nodded faintly. "We still kept in touch a little. I didn't completely disappear." His voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "I knew what was happening to you." Ethan's hold tightened without him realizing. "So you were watching me all that time?" Liam didn't deny it. He just lowered his head. "That day," he continued softly, "I left Noah with my friend and went to the hospital." Ethan's breath caught. "After the surgery, I just left." He said it like it was nothing, like it didn't matter, like it hadn't cost him anything. Ethan turned him around then, his hands gripping Liam's shoulders, his eyes searching his face as if trying to see everything he had missed. Slowly, carefully, his hand moved, fingers brushing along Liam's side again, finding the scar he had touched before. This time, he didn't stop himself. He traced it fully, from beginning to end, his touch impossibly gentle, like he was memorizing it. Then lower, where another scar rested. Smaller, softer, but just as real. His throat tightened. "You went through all of this," he whispered. Liam's lips trembled faintly, but he didn't look away. And then, something shifted. Something quiet, but powerful. Liam slowly took Ethan's hand, guiding it more firmly over those scars, as if telling him, "Look, don't turn away this time." Then, lowering his head, he pressed a soft, lingering kiss against Ethan's fingers, and then against the scar itself, his touch reverent, almost sacred. As if those wounds weren't something to hide, but something that had meaning, something that had carried love through pain, through loss, through years of silence. Ethan's breath broke. "Liam." But Liam just shook his head slightly, his voice barely a whisper. "It's okay now." He lifted his gaze, and for the first time, there was no hiding in his eyes. Only quiet honesty. "I'm here." Ethan pulled him into his arms again, tighter this time, as if he finally understood what it meant to almost lose something he could never replace. Time passed in a way that felt both slow and fast at the same time. Days turned into routines. Routines turned into something that felt like home. And before they even realized it, Noah turned 4. The birthday party was bigger than anything Liam had ever imagined. The park was filled with color, with balloons floating in the air, with laughter echoing across every corner. Children ran freely, shouting, chasing each other, their voices blending into one long, joyful noise that never seemed to stop. Noah stood in the middle of it all, smiling wider than Liam had ever seen, proudly introducing Ethan and Liam as his 2 dads to anyone who asked, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan's parents watched from a distance at first, then slowly joined in, their attention never leaving Noah, their smiles soft, warm, almost careful, as if they were making up for something they had missed. Liam stood there for a moment longer than necessary, just watching. Watching Noah laugh. Watching Ethan crouch down to help him with something. Watching a life he once thought he would never have unfold right in front of him. By the time the party ended, Noah had fallen asleep in his grandparents' arms, his small hand still holding onto a ribbon from one of the balloons. That night, after everything quieted down again, Liam and Ethan returned to the apartment. Liam pushed the door open and stopped. The room was glowing. Not brightly, but softly, gently, like it was meant only for them. Candles flickered along the edges of the room, their light dancing across the walls. Roses were scattered carefully, not excessive, not overwhelming, just enough to make the space feel intentional. Liam didn't move at first. He just stood there, taking it in. Then he turned back, and Ethan was already there, kneeling, a small box open in his hand, the diamond catching the soft light with every subtle movement. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan took a small breath. "Liam," he said, his voice steady, but softer than usual, "I love you." Liam's heart skipped. "I always have." A pause, just enough to make the next words land deeper. 8 years, and I never stopped loving you. His eyes didn't leave Liam's, not even for a second. "I can't change what happened before," he continued quietly. "I can't take back the things I didn't understand, or the things I should have done better." His grip tightened slightly around the ring. "But I know what I want now. A step forward. Just one. So, will you let me stay?" His voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Not just today, not just for a while. Another breath. For the rest of our lives." Liam didn't realize he was already moving until he was closer. His vision blurred slightly, his chest tightening with something he couldn't put into words. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But he nodded. Slowly. Surely. And that was enough. Ethan stood up, slipping the ring onto his finger, his hand steady this time. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. Outside, the world moved on as it always did. But inside that small apartment, something had finally come together. Not perfect. Not untouched by pain. But real. And this time, they weren't holding on out of fear anymore. They were staying because they chose to. Time moved forward quietly, but nothing in their lives felt small anymore. The pain, the fear, the years of separation, the nights spent surviving instead of living, all of it slowly receded into the distance, no longer sharp enough to wound, only deep enough to remind them how precious this new life was. Liam went back to school. At first, it felt almost unreal. Sitting in a lecture hall again, carrying books, taking notes, staying up late over assignments. These had once been the ordinary pieces of a future he thought he had lost forever. But this time, he returned to them with something he had never had before, a home to come back to, a child who waited for him with bright eyes, and a man who made sure he never carried everything alone again. Every morning, Ethan drove him to campus before heading to the company. Sometimes he reminded Liam to eat. Sometimes he tucked an extra snack into his bag without saying a word. Sometimes he simply looked at him and said, "Don't push yourself too hard." And for the first time in his life, Liam listened, not because he was weak, but because being cared for no longer felt like a debt he had to repay. He studied hard, just as he always had, but now the force behind him was no longer desperation. It was choice. It was dignity. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had suffered enough to know exactly what kind of life he wanted. His professors noticed. His classmates respected him. And slowly, Liam stopped feeling like an outsider borrowing someone else's future. He belonged there. He belonged in that classroom, in that life, in that home. Ethan, meanwhile, graduated with top honors and stepped fully into the role waiting for him in his family's business. But he was no longer the boy who had once believed life would simply arrange itself around him. He carried responsibility differently now, with steadier hands and clearer eyes. Success mattered, but not for the reasons it once might have. Every contract he reviewed, every meeting he led, every decision he made was shaped by one thought he never said out loud. No one I love will ever have to survive the way Liam did. Under his direction, the company grew stronger, but it also changed. It became fairer, more thoughtful, more human. Ethan never forgot what it meant to be too late, to not look closely enough, to mistake silence for strength. And because of that, he became the kind of leader people trusted. At home, life softened into something so natural it sometimes felt miraculous. Noah grew quickly, as children do when they are loved without fear. The boy who used to cling quietly to Liam's clothes now ran through the house laughing, talking about school, showing off every drawing and every tiny accomplishment as if he had discovered treasure. He became brighter, bolder, endlessly curious. He had friends now, favorite games, favorite snacks, favorite cartoons, and a favorite place at night wedged safely between his two dads on the couch. Sometimes Ethan would catch himself staring at him for no reason at all, just watching the way Noah smiled, the way he threw his whole body into laughter, the way he reached for affection without hesitation, and Ethan would feel the same quiet ache every time. This was what he had almost missed. This was what he would protect for the rest of his life. Ethan's parents changed too. At first, their care for Liam carried the weight of guilt, but over time that guilt turned into something gentler, something steadier, something real. They stopped treating him like someone they had to make up for hurting and began treating him like what he truly was, family. They checked in on his classes, asked about his exams, remembered the small details he mentioned in passing. They worried when he looked tired. They brought Noah gifts and books and homemade meals, not to compensate for the past, but because love, once finally allowed to grow, had begun to root itself naturally. Then one evening, everything shifted again in the quietest possible way. Liam stood in the bathroom holding a test in trembling hands, staring at it long enough for the world to lose its edges. When Ethan stepped in and saw his face, he stopped immediately. His eyes dropped to the test, then slowly lifted back to Liam's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan took one careful step forward and asked, almost gently, "Is it?" Liam nodded once. That was all it took. Ethan crossed the distance between them and pulled him into his arms, holding him so tightly Liam could feel his heartbeat. There was no panic in him, no doubt, only something deeper, calmer, stronger. "Okay," Ethan whispered against his hair. "We'll do this together." And they did. The pregnancy changed the rhythm of the house, but not its warmth. If anything, it deepened it. Ethan became even more attentive, so attentive that Liam sometimes laughed and called him overprotective, though the laughter always ended with him leaning closer instead of pulling away. Meals became non-negotiable. Rest became sacred. Medication, checkups, and quiet evenings took priority over everything else. For once, Liam did not try to prove he could endure more than he should. He no longer wanted to survive by force. He wanted to live well. He wanted to stay. When they told Noah, his eyes widened so much Ethan nearly laughed. "A baby?" Noah asked, looking from one to the other as if trying to make sure this was real. "A real baby?" Ethan crouched to his level and smiled. "A real baby." Noah gasped with the kind of complete, wholehearted joy only a child could manage. "Then I'm going to be a big brother," he announced, already sounding proud of a role he had not even stepped into yet. From that day on, he became fiercely serious about it. He talked to the baby through Liam's stomach. He promised to share his toys, then whispered that maybe not all of them, only the important ones. He asked if the baby liked music, if the baby could hear him, if the baby would know he was the best big brother in the world. And every time Liam watched Ethan kneel beside him and answer each question like it mattered. Something warm and full settled even deeper in his chest. One afternoon, Ethan's father invited Liam to the family house under the excuse of lunch. It felt ordinary enough until the meal ended and a folder was placed in front of him. Liam opened it, confused at first, then stunned into silence. Property, shares, investment accounts, legal documents already prepared. He looked up, shaken. "Dad, I can't take this." Ethan's father held his gaze, calm and unwavering. "This is not compensation," he said, "and it is not charity. This is what should have been yours from the moment we chose to call you family." Ethan's mother reached across the table, her eyes wet but steady. "You have spent too much of your life standing outside doors, wondering if you were allowed in," she said softly. "We never want you to feel that way again." Liam looked down at the papers in his hands, then at the people around him. For so long, everything he had received from life had felt temporary, fragile, conditional. Even kindness had often come wrapped in uncertainty. But this was different. This was not pity. It was trust. It was recognition. It was a place being made for him not because he was weak, but because he was wanted. Ethan's hand covered his under the table, grounding him. "You're not taking it because you need saving," Ethan said quietly. "You're taking it because you belong here." Liam could not speak for a moment. When he finally nodded, it was with tears in his eyes and peace in his chest. He accepted not as someone asking to stay, but as someone finally understanding that he already had. The months continued to pass in quiet, beautiful accumulation. Liam's grades remained excellent. Ethan's work flourished. Noah grew louder, happier, more confident with every passing week. Ethan's parents became the kind of grandparents Noah ran to without hesitation. The new baby grew safely beneath Liam's heart. And the house, whether it was their apartment, Ethan's parents' place, or the future home they were already planning together, always felt full. Full of voices, full of warmth, full of ordinary miracles that no one there would ever call ordinary again. One evening, just before sunset, Liam sat on the couch with one hand resting over the gentle curve of his stomach. Noah was asleep in the next room after a long day of talking to the baby and asking impossible questions. The windows were open. The air was calm. Ethan came over and sat beside him, then took his hand and pressed a kiss to his knuckles like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Are you happy?" he asked. Liam looked at him first, then around the room, at the quiet home they had built, at the books stacked beside his school bag, at Noah's toys left carelessly in the corner, at the future waiting ahead of them no longer as a threat, but as a promise. He thought of the boy he used to be, desperate, proud, exhausted, terrified of becoming a burden. He thought of the nights he had gone hungry, the lies he had told, the train ticket he had clutched like a final gamble, the years he had spent believing he was only ever one step away from losing everything. And then he looked at Ethan again, at the man who had once been the dream he ran from, and had now become the home he returned to. Yes, Liam said softly. Then, after a pause, with a smile that held no fear at all, he added, I really am. Ethan's expression softened into something almost unbearably tender. He leaned in and rested his forehead against Liam's, his voice low and certain. Good, he said, because this time, you don't have to run. Liam closed his eyes for a moment and let himself feel it fully, the truth of where he was, of who he was now, of what his life had become. For the first time in his life, Liam was no longer surviving. He was living, and he was loved in every way he had once believed was only meant for other people.